Hey everyone, this is Andrew Watches Movies, Find Your Film, Movie Bears podcast, and Eric Holmes drinking beer. We are talking about I'm thinking of ending things. That was not a dig, Eric Holmes. That was more of a I'm jealous. You are the man. I love you so much. What one thing that we love very much is I'm thinking of ending things. So this is going to be not even I don't even know if this is a podcast. This is more of a spoiler discussion on a movie that I'm assuming that all five of us love. Now, I'm not going to give a big introduction regarding I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It's currently streaming via Netflix. It is written and directed by one of my favorite filmmakers. I'm sure he's one of your favorite filmmakers too, Charlie Kaufman. Charlie Kaufman. I
Yeah,
think it
from
was.
Trauma.
I'm sorry, Eric.
Oh,
Trauma.
Eric, I was doing my
bad
intro.
joke, bad
I'm
joke.
moderating. What are you doing, Eric?
Sorry.
I'm
This
kidding.
is
I'm
Toxic
kidding.
Avenger 4 that we're talking about?
Yes, yes. But no, this written and directed by Charlie Kaufman, currently streaming on Netflix. I think the idea to band all these podcast co-hosts together was Andrew Martin. Was this your idea regarding the spoilers for talking about this movie?
Yeah, this was. I figured that we all kind of talk about each other's shows a little bit and stuff. We talk online. This seemed like the perfect kind of movie to have a discussion about, since it lends itself more to a discussion than just a summary. Because summarizing this movie, you'd spoil it, and you would also just you kind of take the magic out of it, I think, in the summary, and you just end up telling the entire story. So it's
Right.
more like about the feeling and emotion. So it seems like a good discussion topic.
Okay, you know what? I think first off, I don't know, maybe if this is the right way to go, but we're going to do a roundtable sort of a discussion on our initial reactions towards to I'm thinking of ending things. First off, Will Lindis, I was looking at your Facebook. You had high praise for I'm thinking of ending things. My first question to you is how much do you love Charlie Kaufman's work, and then what was your first reaction towards this movie?
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head there with sort of my influences coming into this screening definitely weighed the way that I experienced this film, because I am a huge Charlie Kaufman fan, whatever you want to call it. Like, when Charlie Kaufman makes a film, I'm going to watch it. And because he always has creative ideas. He's someone that creates films that are a little bit off or different than kind of the standard thing that's coming out of the gate or coming through my VOD or coming out to theater. So I was already on board coming into this, but I was very happy to get through the entirety of the film and to have all of those same hopes and expectations and wants from this film actualized. This is a very complex, very nuanced film that throws a ton at you, and I found myself at the end both awash with emotion and also just mind reeling as I was trying to piece together pieces that I don't think I fully pieced together until hours later as the synapses finished firing.
Well, Will, when you review Kaufman films, let's just say, I don't know if you guys, you and your crew loved Anomalisa when it was released in 2015. Do you ever do hey, as much as we love Kaufman, do you ever give a Surgeon General type of warning? Or do you think if you know what you know about Kaufman, you don't really need to give those kind of warnings before people see the movie?
I think that sometimes you have to give those types of warnings with filmmakers like Kaufman, with filmmakers like Wes Anderson, with filmmakers who are very much built off of like their style or kind of whatever their core element is first. Because if you don't find yourself latching on to whatever that core element is, whatever else is embellished outside of that, whatever the final product is going to be like, you're not going to be in tune with. So Kaufman is one of those people. I could totally see someone walking away from this film or any Kaufman film and saying, you know what, it threw too many things at me. He comes across as a little pretentious. He comes off as a little indulgent. I think all of those things are very, very fair. And that's what I would put as the disclaimer on the box. But for me, it's also one of those things where I think with a filmmaker like Kaufman, if you like his indulgences, if you like his style, if you like his particular flavor, he can throw so much of those things on the plate and you're still going to just say, give me more, give me more, give me more.
Totally agree. Eric Holmes, you were the last one to see I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So actually, in a way, you have a really fresh take on the film. What is your immediate visceral reaction to the movie?
Well, first of all, this seemed like very outside the box for Lloyd Kaufman, because I'm used to watching Poultry Guys and Toxic Avenger, and this was more like a is more like a movie that the guy that did
Yes.
Police would do, or Synecdoche, New York. This seems like more like his speed. I'm surprised he wasn't the one that wrote and directed it. But I gotta say, Lloyd Kaufman really surprised me with this one. He really went for it.
Very cool. Very
Is the
toxic
joke
answer,
over?
Eric.
Okay, the
I
joke's
am very toxic. Go back to Tromaville.
Right.
This is the wrong spoiler thing.
I,
We can talk about Terror
I do
Firma,
love
too.
Lloyd Kaufman. I do love Lloyd Kaufman, but we're talking about Charlie Kaufman, and this was it surprised me because at first I was like, oh no, like I couldn't figure out why. And I mentioned this in the thing. I couldn't figure out why Charlie Kaufman would do this because it felt like one of those snappy, clever indie movies where the person's always talking in voiceover. And I was like, I've seen this movie and I've hated these movies a million times. And why is Charlie Kaufman doing this movie? And then they got to the parents' house, and then things got a little weird. And I like weird. And so from that point on, the movie started really grabbing me. And then I started kind of seeing where they were going with the movie. Because I've heard from my friend Sam. She was telling me about the book, and I saw that Charlie Kaufman was doing. So I knew this movie was coming out for some time, but I never read the book. And I'll probably do it now that I saw the movie. I can't imagine. I'm really curious of what the book is because the movie's so oddball that I cannot imagine, and it's so Charlie Kaufman that I cannot imagine that that's what the book is. But maybe it is. Who knows? But yeah, it was a cool movie and had a bunch of stuff to kind of break up. You guys mentioned twist or not twist, but spoilers. I still cannot figure out how you would spoil this. You could tell, like, before watching this, you could tell me everything about the movie, and I would, first of all, just be confused as you're telling me everything about the movie, and then I would watch it and go, "Oh, okay," because it's not you can't spoil it in the sense that there's Bruce Willis is dead the whole time, or Brad Pitt and Edward Norton are the same guys. Spoiler alert on those two movies, but it's not a movie like that. It's a movie you kind of got to experience and kind of pick apart and. Oh, that's that and that's that, but it's not real explicit about it. You just kind of got to figure those things out as you watch it. And hey, that's what Charlie Kaufman does best.
Bruce Perky, you know what? Me and Eric, I'm gonna lump Eric and I together. We're pretty slow human beings. We're not as smart as you or Will or Andrew. And I had this guess that maybe you were able. I'm assuming Will and Andrew, they probably put the puzzles together pretty quickly. I think maybe on the first watch. Upon your first watch, were you able? First of all, what did you think of the movie, and were you able to piece together, when we get into the spoilers, the overall puzzle of what it was about?
So, as far as the movie goes, I like the movie quite a bit. It has still sinking in on me, so I don't have it. I guess I feel like it's going to go up and up and up, in my opinion, as I go, because right now it's solid, but it's still working in my brain. I kind of admire Andrew having already seen it 3 times, because I know a second viewing, at least, if not a third, is going to add a lot for me. Now, as far as did I know what was going on exactly, I kind of suspected a version of what was going on with a certain character that we keep cutting back to, but I kind of guessed a little wrong on who he might be. So I kind of got a version of that, but it didn't really all the way gel with me. So I think you overestimate my ability to understand and unravel this out of the gate. But overall, I really liked it. I was really intrigued by it. I was unsettled by it a lot of the times and confused by it, but also strangely, it had some emotional impact on me I wasn't expecting. And then by the end, I was just like, kind of like, top of my head is gone for a little while. I have to think about what's going on and reassemble my brain, kind of is where I left, I guess. So, and last but not least, just to throw another turd at Tenet, this is a movie that is worth unraveling. That is not.
Also worth unraveling is what he meant to say.
You know what? We're doing a spoiler on Tenet, all 4 of us. You're not invited, Bruce. You're not invited to our Tenet spoiler pod. Are you sad about that?
I was thinking about going. I was thinking about going across state lines to try to see Tenet even, and Bruce is talking me out of it. Like, I was going to travel for that thing.
I have a habit of slamming movies and talking people into them, though. I don't know why that is. So
You can talk me out of state lines, though. I'm not going to travel to see Tenet.
The review I want to see is we take Greg recording his and Bruce recording his separately, and you play Bruce's backwards and see if they meet right in the middle. I haven't seen Tenet. That's just my hunch.
No, you nailed it. You nailed
Okay,
it.
all right.
Well, no, actually, the most experience regarding the spoilers is Andrew. You've seen it 3 times.
I
And to
have.
Bruce's
I had a friend that I wanted to watch it with who came over yesterday. I'm like, let's put this on again.
Wow. Does it?
So-
Well, Bruce was assuming that it's going to be a deeper experience for him every time he sees it. The second to third time, did you pick up new things, and do you love it even more after watching it 3 times?
Well, I love this movie, and I'm frustrated by this movie, like in equal measure, pretty much. I will say as well, like you were saying that we might be smarter and put the pieces together. For part of the movie, I'm like, okay, how does he have this downfall, and how does he become an old ass janitor like through the entire movie? I'm like, what happens to him where his life just devolves into this? But I don't know. It really struck me because it's about a life that never starts instead, and is just kind of lived in his imagination. And that's, I guess, the thing that could be spoiled about it when you were saying that it couldn't be spoiled, Eric. I think that some of it can be, because I think that it could be spoiled to the point where some people don't give it a chance even, because some people hate those abstract movies that just live in somebody's head, and they like to be spoon-fed things and told like what to think the entire time. But I think that we could even just go into our own like hermetically sealed like chambers and come up with our own reviews, and they'd be vastly different on what this film is and what it means to us, because it's almost like one of those mirrors that you put up, and like what you bring to it is what you walk away with too, like what's happened in your life, your experiences, kind of what you regret. It's one of those movies that kind of makes you wistful and pensive.
Andrew Martin, when you were looking in the mirror, of I'm thinking of ending things, what did it reflect back to you? Not just as a moviegoer, but as a human being on Earth.
Thinking about my 40 years of life on this earth, and like what has passed me by, and like what opportunity or chances I didn't take. That's what the movie made me think of. And I think that's like Kaufman seems very obsessed with that throughout his entire career. I mean, everybody loves Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, right?
Yeah.
Joel was weak, and he didn't follow her into that beach house. And that was the whole crux of the problem with Joel right there, is that he wasn't the type of guy that would go into the beach house, break in, and be a free spirit. He's obsessed with those kinds of characters throughout his entire career, because Jesse Plemons, very much a Joel who's just lived very safely, taken a job, obviously, that he was even overqualified for. His mind is even close to what it is in the movie. Like that they're portraying at his parents' house and everything, which I absolutely love the parents too. Like, God, there's so much to unwrap in this movie. So much, like so many places that you can go with it.
Will Lindis, can you unwrap the most obvious twist? What do you think is the most obvious twist? And what's funny about this is we're talking about a spoiler episode. Andrew Martin has seen it 3 times, and he is a very good interpretation of the movie. But I think Andrew, you were saying?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the last thing I was going to say about the movie is that I love that it is the best dissection of the manic pixie dream girl trope I've ever seen in my life. And like, that's what I guess I see the mirror up there as well. Cause I'm kind of a little bit of a weird eclectic person myself too. So I saw a lot of myself in that character.
Very cool. Will, I don't know. I'm so glad I did not send you that. I did not give you that click on the IndieWire article. I don't know if you went to that Indie or unpacked that article. Okay. Well, that's actually kind of cool that you didn't do that, because I'm cheating. I'm a big cheater. I have a page of all the spoilers here, and at the end of this, I'm just gonna read everything to all you guys and say you're all
good.
wrong.
Oh, give us a report card. Yeah.
I haven't read anybody's things except for your review, Greg, that you put up there. So that's the only thing I've read about this movie.
So that gives you, if you read my review, that gives you an F- as far as knowledge of the movie, because I know nothing. Will,
I read it before I saw it.
Okay. I appreciate that. Will,
what talked me into it, actually.
I don't ever read any of my stuff. Read something else. Read Bruce's stuff, or just listen to Eric. It's way better. Or listen to Will's stuff. Will, what is the biggest thing that, as far as a twist from your POV, unwrap that?
Yeah, and I think this is the thing that both to Eric's point, you can kind of see coming if you put the pieces together, but also there's enough sort of side paths that you could find yourself on that this is a movie that doesn't necessarily confirm its twist until it gets a little further in. And so this whole film is these two people in a car having this conversation, but these two people in this car, here's the twist, are the same person many, many, many years later in life. He is thinking of ending things quite literally, as opposed to the I'm thinking of ending things with this relationship, as is sort of like the bait and switch setup. So this man is a janitor who is recalling back to a woman that he met once and didn't pursue, didn't kind of take the step towards. He kind of remembers her name, maybe, sort of. Was it Louisa? Was it Lucy? Was it Lucia? It's something like that. It's something like that. But he's thinking back at the end of his life when he's feeling isolated and alone, and as though everyone else is sort of moving beyond him and he stayed stuck in this life. And he's thinking to himself, what if I had done something different? What if I talked to that girl? What would it have been like? Would she have been really into films the way I am? Would she have been super smart, super into physics? Would she have been a poet? I like poetry. Would she have been an artist? I fancy myself an artist. Maybe she would be an amazing one. So he starts casting all of these coulda, woulda, shouldas on this fictional woman that he only briefly met, and tries to both realize her as like a savior and also as this kind of haunted phantom of the things that could never be and will never be at this stage in his life.
Yes. Bruce, was that your read on the twist?
It is for sure a version of it. But one thing I would add is it's really interesting about the way that Kaufman does it is, as you're following through this internal narrative where he's kind of all characters and sort of not some of the characters, is that you also have this really strange interaction where the characters that are him, that he's created in this narrative, are also kind of talking back to him or hearing what he's doing.
Yes.
And I don't know, and I kind of took that as like, is that his own self-doubt or his own self-loathing? So he's kind of hitting back to himself through that other character. So that was one thing I kind of saw there that I thought was really interesting. The basic reading, though, I still go along the same path. Although there's one caveat. This is kind of still nagging in the back of my brain, is that this is also a movie that could very easily be, or story, an unreliable narrator as well, because we are seeing his version of what he is doing. And this is a little bit out there, but throughout the whole movie, there's a very creepy element to it. And at various times throughout the movie, I felt like, is this guy a stalker? Is this guy a predator? Is he actually lying to himself and to us about what he has done to or thought about various women in his life? And there's a lot of little weird little things that happen in here that make me think that that could be a reading. I don't think it's necessarily a reading in the story, but there's things that happen, like when he goes to the little ice cream diner, and there's the two that are like, obviously, and that could be like the cool girls don't like him, and the uncool girl is more who he relates to, and it's kind of, there's that whole element to it. But there's also just something, I don't know, and this could be the mirror aspect on myself. There's something creepy about him that makes me not totally believe even his internal version of what's happening. Like, he's setting himself up to be a little bit of a, woe is me, sad sack. If I had only gone through with all these things in my life would have been different. And I'm kind of like, do I really quite believe him? So I guess that would be one thing I would kind of throw out there as a possible other path.
Bruce looks into that mirror and he sees not just Kaufman looking back to him, but also maybe a little bit of Lars von Trier there too.
Yeah, I was thinking of the house that Jack built when he was talking about that as well. I'm like, like maybe they're going to uncover some bodies like underneath the snowfall at some point.
I don't know, man. Other than his, maybe, yeah.
Andrew, your theory of reflection, I was thinking about that in the mirroring thing. Bruce's explanation got me a little bit scared of Bruce. So remind me never to make fun of you, Bruce. ever again. I promise. Eric Holmes, is this your initial interpretation about the janitor and making up people? Will says it's maybe a
Well,
woman that he met in his life, maybe for a
I think
short
that's
time, and built a
I think
world
that's
around
a
her. Yeah.
I to Andrew's point, I think that was probably the point of the book. I haven't read the book, but I think that's what the big twist is in the book. And but I mean, that's kind of what I got. I definitely got the him and the janitor were the same person. And I was also thinking about the dancers. They showed the dancers early on, and they were kind of clumsy and kind of not very good. And then and then the dancers show up at the end, and they're really graceful, and they have this huge, it follows them down the hallway as they dance. And um, not only are the dancers better, but the filmmaking as the movie goes, it seems to get more confident as the movie goes too. Because as I said early on, it's like I've seen this movie 1,000 times and I hated it every time, and to where it gets weird, but it's confidently so. And the dancers kind of, and I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe it's a parallel of him as he gets older. When he met the girl or saw the girl the first time, he was unsure of himself. He was unconfident. And as he gets older to where he is now, uh, now he's more confident in who he is, and he could have made that jump. And so, uh, you know, and I guess that would be the point of the movie, him thinking of how wonderful would this life be, or actually not even how wonderful, just how would this life be? Because there's bad stuff that happens in it too. It's good, bad, both of it. So it's definitely air quotes realistic depiction of what that relationship could have been, because it's not, it would all been sunshine and rainbows, it would have been awkward and kind of, we'd have fights, we'd have good times and this and that. But yeah, there's something there with the dancers. I'm not quite sure what it is. I maybe has something to do with that. But that's just another example of all the little clues this movie has in it. You pick them apart and it's like, oh, that's a thing that could mean this. That kind of broadens the appeal of the movie as a whole, I think.
So as soon as I saw the movie, I immediately cheated. I went to YouTube and I looked up I'm thinking of ending things book review spoilers. And I was horrible by doing that, but it had this woman just talking about the book, and her explanation, and I'm taking her as a gospel truth. Her explanation is she loved it, like your friend Sam, Eric. She loved it because of the construct of the entire story. To your point, Will, is taken from the imagination of the janitor. So everyone, the only real person in the entire story, ultimately, is the janitor, and obviously the students who populate that high school, right? And I guess it's a story about his final day of existence, right? He's built up this entire world in his mind, and this is, and this idea of loneliness and regret. He's just looking back at, he's created an entire world for himself to live in his head for his entire life until his final moments inside the snowed out truck that he's in. So, and that's the end of the movie. And I think there's so many more layers. I think I forgot who was talking about. Bruce, were you talking about the other characters and how they have how they confront each other if they're not real?
Mhm.
And I cheated twice again with the IndieWire article. Kaufman was, I'm sorry, guys. I'm horrible. Don't ever invite me to a card game, but unless it's Go Fish. But you know what? He said basically, even if the character is not real and they're made up in his mind, it's about giving these characters agency. It's like the idea, and I'm thinking about how Charlie Kaufman adapted Adaptation, which itself was a book called The Orchid Thief. They gave Kaufman the book. They said, hey, we're giving you money. We want you to adapt this story of Susan Orlean, right? And her meeting with the Orchid Thief, right? And he was supposed to do a straight adaptation and get paid for the script. And what happened? He got the money, he spent the money, and he couldn't do a straight adaptation, a linear, true story based on that book. What did he do? He created an entire world, a meta world, where people who maybe some of them were real, but they were kind of real. They were inspired by his knowledge of pop culture and love of classical music, his love of maybe different writers and artists, people who are critics. Maybe in an adaptation, it was Robert McKee, and he in this movie, it's Pauline Kael and her book For Keeps. So there's a lot of Charlie Kaufman inside this movie. I'm sure the actual source novel had a lot of that stuff in, but you have a little bit of an adaptation kind of mixture into I'm Thinking of Ending Things, where nothing in this movie is real, but in that unreality, that's where we find our truth. So it's just a really confusing kind of thing. That was the main interpretation. But Andrew, to your point, do you think it really doesn't matter how you interpret the movie? It's I think it goes back to the beginning of this discussion. You were talking about the visceral emotion that one can get out of a Charlie Kaufman experience.
Yeah, I don't think there's any right or wrong way to interpret this movie. As I was saying, it's kind of a mirror. I mean, even in the first 10 minutes of the movie, I kind of wanted to choke both of the characters out myself, or see like her cause the car to like veer off a cliff or something, just to get me out of that car ride and get me away from those characters. And it's probably because I saw too much of myself in them as well. So I didn't want to spend the car ride with myself. And yeah, that's why I'm saying there's no wrong way to look at it, because I'm looking at it through, I don't know, an unshared life kind of thing, which is kind of like, it does make it a bit of a horror film there too. Like Chris was saying, it's a bit creepy before. I was thinking about it like that. Like, yeah, he's the lonely old man who's around children all the time, and people might be a little bit scared of him, and I don't become that person. Oh, it's a frightening kind of movie. You can take it any way you want to.
You're not supposed to look at me, Andrew, when you're saying that, by the way. Please. That's not
I was
very
looking
nice.
at myself. I'm looking at myself in the mirror right here, because I'm the one that's talking.
I took the movie as a really action-packed action movie starring Scott Adkins and Michael Jai White. That's the movie.
You can take it that way. You can take it, but it's also a bad Robert Zemeckis movie as well. Like, if you remember, it really is.
I forgot about that.
That's true. That is very true.
You guys have any idea why did he use Robert Zemeckis in that?
Probably because he probably likes Robert Zemeckis. They're probably friends, but he needed this part to go with the conversation where there's the shitty movie ideas that like take place in your head and they just live there. Like, that's what that whole part was. It's like the movie that I think he wanted to write. Like, the whole movie is every single thing that guy wanted to do, I think. And he wanted Robert Zemeckis to like do his screenplay where he got the waitress that he was in love with to fall in love with him by standing up for her when, what was it, a vegan thing that somebody wanted, like, ordered or something?
Yeah, Santa Fe burger.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why I love Kaufman, too, because it's so comedic the way that he throws these ideas out there and the metaphors that he creates. But he makes them lively. Like, you're talking about adaptation. That movie has a lot of darkness with the drugs to it and everything. And, like, it becomes that wild Hollywood movie at the end. Like, he really knows how to let things rip in his movies.
I also had that whole bit with the ham. It was really subtle.
The
maybe
pig.
Subtle, but, well, no, not the pig. This was after the pig.
Oh,
this was the ham. And they have this beautiful dinner, this beautiful cooked ham, and it cuts, and then she's looking at it, and Jesse Plum is like, no.
Yeah,
and then immediately it's like, oh, the maggot, that's the maggot pig.
Yes.
Oh, and then so like all this weird stuff's happening, but that ham's always barely in the foreground. It's like, remember where I actually now into the Robert Zemeckis point, it's just ground up cow. I wonder if it's it definitely has some vegan kind of things to it, words that can't. But real quick before I forget every word in my head, can we talk about from now on, from here forth, I'm just making a proposal that anytime someone talks about the best actors ever, Toni Collette needs to be at least in the top 3. Can we agree on that?
Yes, we can.
Co-signed.
Yep.
Whenever Toni Collette shows up in a movie, especially the last few years, I've said, well, that's probably the best performance I'm going to see this year. Like, it's just who she is right now in her career.
Weeks apart, I saw her in Hearts Beat Loud and Hereditary in the theater a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Like, those are so totally different ends of the spectrum with her performances, and she crushed both of them.
And
Like,
her
she's good in
character-
everything.
And her character in this one, just because it kind of it gets so weird and kind of jumps times, I guess
Yeah.
it's through his head, whatever it is, it jumps time. So Toni Collette's playing like so many different versions of her character in different aspects of her life, and they're so, oh man, she's great. She's fantastic. I cannot wait to get pissed that she didn't win an Oscar this year.
That's just at this point. It's every year is just set aside an extra shot just for when Toni Collette or whoever it is that is kind of in her. I guess maybe Florence Pugh is sort of like getting. She has a trajectory that's I think similar for me. But you're right about the jumping time thing. Like this is a movie that for me it was very much like. Not as much like the actual jumping of time as much as all of these different ideas and memories and thoughts all just sort of jumbling. Like when we dwell in our regrets, when we marinate in our loneliness, we don't often think about it like in a very linear, organized way. We're thinking like, oh yeah, and then that's like that one time 2 years earlier where I said that stupid thing, and that's just like that time when I was 5 years old, and like everything just sort of mushes and merges together. And it was fun to see that with the memory of the ham and with the memory of the maggots. Those were two separate things that he probably experienced in his life. He probably experienced, like, because he grew up on the farm, the thing with the pigs and them getting sick with the maggots and all of that. And he probably also had an amazing ham dinner at one point that he remembers with this family. And as his brain is going through all of these things, he merged those into one narrative. And even the more subtle stuff, like I've got the wallpaper up behind me. I loved watching the wallpaper change scene to scene. Like sometimes it would be red with other color flowers, and sometimes it would be green, and sometimes the fire pit place would be upstairs, and then they would say, "All right, I'm going to go downstairs now," and she'd walk down the stairs, and suddenly she would be, in that same room but with different wallpaper. I could see maybe. It doesn't have a narrative overlap with like the film, like Aronofsky's Mother, but there is definitely that same, like the way the story kind of folds in and loops around itself that Mother did. There's big portions of this film that do that as well.
I didn't think of that with Mother. I really loved Mother when that came out as well, and this does have a lot in common with that, except for it being the horror movie that Mother is, and, and having like that third act of Mother is just horrifying. I don't want to spoil that and hear at the same time either, though.
I don't remember him. I don't remember him tearing apart a baby in this one. But
that's what I was staying away from.
Eric's gonna go there. Eric will go there.
We'll just do a Mother spoiler cast on this one too, and just merge them together. Yeah.
But that's the thing, though. I don't think that spoils Mother because there's a baby. There's so much weird shit going on in Mother. By the time you get to that, you will have forgotten that I even said anything about.
I guess it's like spoiling Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. How do you spoil that movie?
You don't.
Like
you don't.
You can't. That's an impossible to spoil movie.
Bruce,
I guess this does have some in common.
Bruce, for you, what was the strongest part of this movie, just in general? What did you love the most about it? Was it the dialogue, or was it the structure? Like, William said, was it just the ambition behind it?
To me, I think it was the way it. And I think this is kind of talking to what William was talking about, is the way it works on your brain. It's almost to me like, okay, how to describe this? You get a comedian that is doing some sort of a joke, and the joke isn't funny, but they repeat it and they repeat it and they repeat it, and eventually they push through the other side. It becomes funny again. Well, this one starts out and it gets more and more unraveled, and it gets to the point where it's so unraveled that you're almost adrift. You're like, what the hell is happening here? But then as it starts to come around, because it's three thirds, right? There's the ride, the house, and then the other ride, the snow and all that. And by the time you get to that third piece, it's like he's primed you. He's given you the insanity. He's given you the kind of sort of normal part. And then it's all kind of coming together in my brain. So I guess to me, it's the overall flow that I really loved about it. So that by the end, it's almost like I said, he's seasoned you to this universe of his, and he's allowing you to actually now hit you past the brain level. It starts at the brain level of like, this is weird, this is strange, I'm intrigued, and it goes into the heart level at that point. And that's where you start to actually it works on your emotions in really weird ways. And you start getting repeated images, and instead of them just being quirky, they start to have an effect on you. And that's what I really loved about this movie. Seeing those things again and again. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of effect, that last shot of the vehicle in the snow, Andrew, you've seen it 3 times.
Mhm.
A part of me wonders, should I be frustrated that, since obviously De Palma's my guy, I love everything operatic at the end. Should I be frustrated that it didn't go operatic and it just had that still shot and it just cut to the credits? Or did that last shot have power for you? What did you think of that final moment? Because you were able to actually marinate on the ending.
Well, the first time that I watched it, I actually messaged Will, and I was like, "Someone's dead in that car, right?" He's like, "Yeah." But then I left it on. The second time I watched it was with the subtitles on, and I left it on through the credits. And damn it, Charlie gets hopeful, like a little bit in that third act, and that's actually my favorite thing about this movie is the hopeful element of it, like the message from the pig. Actually, when he is saying that you're in the place that you're supposed to be in your life. The world is made up to get you to this point. Like, even if you're a rotten, maggot-ridden pig, you're still living the life that you're supposed to, basically. And at the end of that film, if you leave the subtitles on, there's still hope at the end of the movie because that car is sputtering. The car is not dead. The engine's not off. I don't know if the person's actually dead in it, to be honest. Like, they're just kind of like holding on and just trying to get that engine to like roll over one more time. So
like
I think
Schrodinger's Jake.
Yeah, I think it's important that it's quiet because of that too, because it gives you that little thing. Because it's even the one last thing that you can make it a mirror. You can interpret the movie how you want to. Even either he's almost dead, or he's trying to like keep going and trying to find the strength for another day, and trying to take the message of the pig and keep going with that and keep like living and maybe not regret the next day. So I don't know. That is like it leaves you operatic with your thoughts at least.
Well, what's your read
in my brain?
What's your read on the end, Will?
Well, I think you can read it as both ways. I think intentionally the best way to read it is this is a person who is at this very crossroads moment in their own life, quite literally. And you could almost put that the bulk of this film is happening in those moments as he's trying to figure out if he just wants to succumb or if he does want to kind of sputter. And you're sort of left there wondering, what do I want him to do? Should he do it? Is he going to? And I think a lot of that is even telegraphed in this one too. And I like this. There's a scene very early on where they're talking about paintings, and they're specifically talking about when you look at a landscape, like, well, how do you know that it's supposed to be sad, or how do you know that it's supposed to be lonely if there's not a person in there? And they go through I mean, it's a funny scene because it's like, well, no, you're the one that feels that thing. But here at the end, Kaufman has asked us to do the same thing. He's not going to show us Jake. We're not going to have someone rushing into the scene and discovering a body. We're not going to have someone mournfully walking away. We're stuck on that frame, and we're left to sort of interpret the feeling and sort of imprint ourselves on the film the way that it's imprinted itself on us up to that point. So I think that's beautifully done, and I think that you can easily interpret it in both directions.
That's a great read. I think it's sort of it's sort of, I guess, an interactive work of art that he's creating for us, and we become like those quote unquote fake characters who have agency. We have agency in a way with the stories that we want to progress with, so yeah. Eric, were you hopeful like Andrew at the end with the truck, or did the Toxic Avenger come out of the truck for Pete's sake? Were they in Tromaville?
I interpret it as a giant mutant crushing a guy down into a basketball and shoving another guy's face into a tape player, hitting rewind and pulling it up, and he's got tape face.
No, that's Tenet.
But that's just the way I interpreted it. I mean, you can interpret it in whatever way you want.
It's a good interpretation. Mars Attacks.
No, the ending was just kind of. I didn't interpret any of that. I just used that as a scene to kind of reflect on the rest of the movie. So I wasn't even thinking whether he was alive or whether it was dead. That didn't even enter my mind. It was just I'm trying to think. What was that Darren Aronofsky? The Fountain. Okay, it's been a while since I've seen The Fountain, but I saw that in the theater, And me and my friend Alex were watching it, and the movie gets over, and the credits are just rolling. They just got the beautiful music playing, and neither one of us can move. We're just kind of stewing in it, just going, and just kind of reflecting on the rest of the movie. So it wasn't really trying to figure anything out or trying to come up with an interpretation of what it means. For me, it was just a static shot to say, all right, it's over. What do you think? Think to yourself, because the typical thing is once the picture goes black and there's credits, that's where you leave. But sometimes in movies they have the credits play, but there's a picture, and well, there's still a picture, so I can't leave yet because the movie's not over yet. And so whenever movies do that, for me, that's just time to sit there and reflect on what I just saw, whether it's or in some cases, it's like good enough, and then I leave if the movie sucked. But
I used to work at a theater, and I judged audiences on that, actually. Made me think of Call Me By Your Name, which it hangs on that image of Elio at the end of it. We would judge audiences on like if they'd leave before the movie was actually over, if they'd stay and reflect on the movie like you're supposed to. So that's a good take.
But it also depends on the movie. Like, I'm not going to sit through Endgame and reflect on that because there's nothing to reflect on. It's just fun popcorn movie. But
I don't know. Tony Stark died in Endgame. Like, there's stuff to reflect on in that one. That one's sad.
Okay.
Like, Captain America's dead.
Say so.
Like we're going on like an entirely different phase.
But compared to something like this, or even like a ghost story, dude, the lights came up before I could leave the theater and go straight. I could not move after watching that. I'm just like, and then I had to walk to my car. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
I'm not ready.
I'm not ready to go back out into the world yet.
I'm not going to have as layered an interpretation as Will does, but Bruce, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's going to be a tough one, okay? When you look at Charlie Kaufman's body of work, not just as a director, but as a writer, if you can just string together most of his work, I'm going to have a reductive take on Kaufman's work right now. In big picture-wise, I think it's about him spending his entire life learning how to deal with loneliness through a very visceral and emotional fashion, but also in a very cerebral fashion, and see whether he can manage it too. And wondering, do you see a thematic through line just from Kaufman's work from the last 20 or 25 years, or do you think each project is its own world?
No, I definitely would agree that the through line you're seeing is definitely there. I also feel like there's a through line of he is always examining, well, not always, but I say a lot of times he's examining a couple things. One is memories and reality, and also seems to a lot of times be a meta element of characters in a narrative, and then another level above that narrative, and then how you interpret, like how those all interact. And I think you see it here, you see it in oh shoot, my brain's like losing the names of the titles, but a lot of them have this kind of element, and here you have it too, where like the characters have their own life, and that's what you're talking about, that meta element to them, where they are talking back and they have their own kind of reality, and it becomes a little bit of a commentary also, and on almost on like the reality of movies or fiction or writing or stories, and how they are a reality in our own brains. They have their own life, and they also are a story about a character. So I think that he has that kind of thing going on in a lot of his movies as well. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. William probably has a more eloquent way to say it, or Andrew.
I hope the movie you were talking about is his masterpiece, Synecdoche, New York. I hope that was it.
Yeah, it could be. It could be any of them, though. Think about it. They all have elements of that. These kind of layers. They always have these weird layers of reality going on. So,
all right. Well, I think, you know what? Before we go, you guys have any final thoughts on the film? Andrew Martin, we're going to start with you.
Well, we didn't really talk about Jesse so much. We've talked about Jake a lot in the movie. Now, Jesse, she appears to have her own agency a bit in the movie, but she still seems to kind of adhere to what his preconceived notions of her are supposed to be. Like when she's a waitress when he met her, she's a waitress. They're trying to do a trivia thing, like when he thinks that he met her there. Because, like, I kind of wondered throughout if it's many different women that he kind of met. And Charlie Kaufman, he really, really writes that manic pixie dream girl well. I think that Clementine in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is probably like, I know that the critic wrote it about Kirsten Dunst's character in Elizabethtown when they came up with the whole thing. But Clementine, I think, is like, she is the proverbial manic pixie.
Yeah.
And Joel kind of tries to mold her into what he wants in that movie as well. And Jake is trying to do that through this movie, like the same way. And I thought the deconstruction of that theme in movies was done perfectly in this, just by Jessie Buchanan's, like her acting in this, I thought was extraordinary. I thought that she was perfect in this as well. Like her and Toni Collette were, like, they earned the screen together. Like she earned her time with her on there. And I don't know, that character that just kind of comes in and doesn't have their own backstory, doesn't have their own full life, I thought was really examined well in this. And kind of like saying to stop trying to heal yourself through these relationships and these things. Like that character, I wish that at some point he would have listened to the pig and felt like he was enough, I guess I should say. And maybe could have seen these people as equals instead of these kind of unattainable things where he puts his own kind of spin on them and doesn't actually meet them and get to know them as humans. So I think that that's kind of one of the bigger things that this movie was exploring too, because that is, I think, the key to Charlie's loneliness that you're talking about too. Kind of how he puts everybody up there on his pedestal, can't really approach them. Clementine is very much that character in Eternal Sunshine. And I think that even if you go to Patricia Arquette in Human Nature, he's been writing that character his whole career. So.
I'm just glad Jessie Buckley's getting work. I mean,
she's great in Beast. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say that
movie is so good.
I was gonna say that I haven't seen Wild Rose. I'm sure. Will, you see everything? Did you? Okay,
I haven't seen Wild Rose.
I loved Wild Rose, and it also had one of the best original songs from last year too. It's a movie about a musician. So she is amazing in the lead in that.
Yeah, that song was, I think, written by Mary Steenburgen.
Yes, based off of her own like some mental trauma she experienced. Mary Steenburgen had after an injury. It's as much fun as that movie is, Wild Rose. The backstory behind like this disorder that Mary Steenburgen had that inspired it, where her, after receiving like head trauma, she would like hear songs instead of like seeing certain scenes in her head. Like it was just like her brain. It is a fascinating thing. So if you watch the movie, then go research it afterwards, because the article is amazing.
Yeah, that Mary Steenburgen side plot, that should be a movie. That literally should be a movie. Yeah, no, but Andrew, Beast, that's my favorite Buckley performance, because we're all sociopaths here, so we love we love our Beast. Before we're out here, Will, a couple things regarding the movie before we're out.
Yeah, so you mentioned Jessie Buckley. She's absolutely amazing in this. The whole cast is. Charlie Kaufman is, we were talking about themes and sort of what he brings to the table in terms of his through line. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And I'm definitely seeing, in addition to sort of like the filmic elements that you saw, Bruce, like how he ties narrative into his narratives. He also has this interesting interplay with the way that we see other people. A lot of his films are all based around that interpretation between self and our perception of other. Eternal Sunshine, like you had mentioned, Andrew, is a film about two people who experience these things together. And I mean, he keeps trying to put her in this specific mold and keeps trying to recapture that. And it's all based on who he thinks she is. Anomalisa, he sees her as the only woman in the world who is worth looking at, because everyone else is exactly the same, when realistically she's just sort of a normal woman from the from the Midwest on a random business trip. Being John Malkovich is literally about looking through someone else's eyes. And then of course we have this moment where the Jessie Buckley character is sort of like him casting her in different roles kind of in his own life and all that. But she has a very poignant point of agency a little later on in the film where the janitor is talking to her inside of the school in front of the lockers, and she says, yeah, he was just this creep that looked at me once at trivia and never talked to me, and he's probably been fantasizing about me. And you can see that as a couple of different things, giving the character agency, which is great for the actors, but I think it's also maybe the janitor having some self-awareness of like, yeah, like I'm not fully in this fantasy world. I know what I'm doing is weird. And then all of that playing together with that, what is it called? The dream ballet towards the back part of the film, just sort of pulling all of those elements that they could no longer say to us into like just this emotive blur. This movie, I said it up front, it's very indulgent. It's very indulgent. But Kaufman is very indulgent, and I enjoy his indulgences. So I think that if any of those other movies are ones that in his catalog are ones that you've liked because of their eccentricities, I think that means that you are probably the right type of person to watch this film.
Very cool.
For sure.
Eric Holmes.
I was just thinking about that dancing again, and between this and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I never thought I would be a fan of interpretive dance, just breaking narrative. But man, when it works, it fucking works, man.
Shape of Water, like this one kind of reminded me a bit of Shape of Water, like the reason they dance and everything too, where you run out of words, that's what you got.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's They if they make it an Alien 5, they need to have interpretive dance. The aliens dancing, I want you to die because I'm just an animal. As far as Charlie Kaufman as a whole, the only real thing I can say about him is that I'm glad that he's in a position where he can do weird shit and just keep doing weird shit. You mentioned him doing the adaptation of Adaptation or Orchid Thief. First of all, I don't understand why anyone hires Charlie Kaufman. Hey, we want to do an adaptation of this. I know who we'll call. Charlie Kaufman, that weirdo. We'll have him come in. Like, if you want to use Charlie Kaufman, you hire him to be Charlie Kaufman.
Right.
You know, you hire I was going to say Stanley Kubrick, but he's not alive anymore. And now I can't think of any other writers or directors ever.
You don't hire
Go
Quentin
Westerhouse.
Tarantino to do a Nickelodeon show.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't hire Darren Aronofsky. You don't hire Darren Aronofsky to do Stretch Armstrong movie. You know, you hire Darren Aronofsky. It's like, hey, you're a weirdo. Why don't we just throw a bunch of money at you and do this weird stuff? But I was also thinking of like weirdness in romantic comedies, because that's kind of what this is. You know, people, it's a bad word, 4-letter word to most. So, you know, just kind of like when a really good horror movie comes out and it's like, no, that's not a horror, that's a thriller, or that's an elevated horror.
Oh, I hate that.
This is
Cringe.
absolutely a romantic comedy, but it takes that genre and move. Like, you can take porn and make something great out of it. No one has yet, even though, you know, I have my own thoughts on that, but we'll go on. But
try to find
that's
this one
another
called
podcast.
The Blue Movie.
But yeah, he's just one of those filmmakers that does weird stuff, and I like that he can take the romantic comedy genre and do something really interesting with it. I was thinking a lot of Punch Drunk Love, where that movie's got a bunch of weird stuff in it, like the right at the beginning, the car wrecks and then they drop off that piano thing, the chaos meets order thing, to set off the theme of the entire movie that you're about to watch. Like, you don't see that in How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Nothing wrong with that movie, by the way, but it's neat that when someone can take this genre that people look past as trash and elevate it, not elevate it, but just kind of
Deconstruct it.
Not even that they deconstruct it. They took a legitimate genre and did something that hasn't been done a million times. You You know,
Yeah.
with most other genres, action genre, they got so many different types. Horror, they got so many different types. Drama is so lucid that could be anything. Um, but yeah, romantic comedies are usually pretty stale for the most part, but every once in a while you get a good one, and this is a good one. And I wish more romantic comedies would take chances, because it does lend itself to kind of the quirkiness and weirdness that this movie has in it.
That is a
So
very interesting
thank
lead,
you,
Eric
Charlie
Holmes.
Kaufman. Thumbs up. Two of
Thumbs
them.
up. Yes. Bruce Berkey, you're going to lead us out with your final take, your final thoughts
I,
or comments.
I guess I'll just add on a little bit to what Eric said, and when all is said and done, and there's the emotional impact and all the complexity, and it all unravels in your brain, I think that there's some things that you can go back and watch this movie and just be continually delighted by such strange details that he throws in there. And I can imagine watching this every time that his dog comes in, and every time you see like him with that little badge on, you notice the badge, or just things like where he'll give you the jingle for the little place they go to, but then you'll see the ad for the jingle. And I just think that he layers so much fun in this movie. There is actually a lot of fun, humor, craziness to have in all the emotion, and I think that is what's going to give this movie a lot of rewatchability. I think I could watch this movie and in different moods and get different things. And going to the mirror concept, I think this movie could be really sad sometimes. I think it could be really cathartic sometimes. I think it could be a downright comedy half the way through sometimes. So I think this is a really rich movie, and I think it's going to be something that's going to really stick for the long haul. It's good.
Speaking of something that'll really stick, I get jealous and envious sometimes on our
Jealous.
jealous. Stop it, Eric.
That will get
Stop it
sticky.
now. Stop it now with your trauma stuff, okay? And the rom-com, you know what? It's not a romantic comedy. It's a rom-com. I'm gonna do some pejoratives right through your way. Rom-com.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Or a trom-com.
I do get jealous and jealous
That's
of
a good
Will
one.
that's a new word, by the way. Stop it, Eric. That's a new word. Look it up in the dictionary. Daniel
Trom-com.
Webster Dictionary. Okay, Will Lindis. Okay, I get jealous of you because sometimes when I post on our Facebook group, our Cinematics Facebook group, I say, has anyone seen this movie? And you say, well, I've seen this movie 6 months ago. You don't brag about it, but you're always the resource for cinema. And that said, can you talk about very quickly before we get out of here, where can people find your stuff, and what is the whole goal behind your podcast and your fellow brethren?
Absolutely. So I'm part of a show called Movie Bears Podcast. We are a trio of what we call husky, hairy, huggable homos who do film review from the LGBTQ perspective. My co-hosts Brad and Jim and I have been doing the show for, since 2012. We're like episode 378, which is crazy because it still feels like we're at like episode 12 sometimes. But you can find us just at Movie Bears Podcast on all of the different like social apps, moviebearspodcast.com. We do a weekly live stream recording, and actually some of the people in this very chat have hung out with us live as we've talked, and it's always fun to see people like pop in and say like, oh yeah, I saw that too, or what'd you think about that? So that's where you can find us.
Okay, and Andrew Martin, you have a very interesting take with Andrew Watches Movies. I do listen to a lot of movie podcasts. Can you just tell the listeners what they can expect from your podcast, which I find very, very personal, a very personal take, personal journey through cinema, I suppose.
Yep, that's what I try to do over there. I try to just take most of the movies I watch, because you can't do it with every one of them, because I like to highlight most of what comes out. But if it hits me personally, I do like to put that into the podcast as well, kind of like reflecting on life and everything. I don't know. It kind of entertains me, so that's what I do. And you can find it at Andrew Watches Movies on all the podcatchers, and I have an Instagram too that you can like look at there. But yeah, I just try to watch what I like to watch and kind of do a little bit of a diary almost thing. I'd say that's kind of what I do. I'm starting to do things where I'm taking the podcast out on the road to some of the nature things around here, kind of talking about some nostalgic films. I really had fun with the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids episode. So I'm going to do that again.
Yes. Speaking
going to
of
do it
which,
with Beetlejuice this month, actually, or next month. So that seems perfect for October. But yeah.
Robert Zemeckis was mentioned on this episode, and by the way, guys, Andrew Martin does like a really intense, just sort of interesting look at what lies beneath. I really love. I can't wait to watch What Lies Beneath and his defense of Robert Zemeckis for in that movie. So it really looks like a movie that's very underrated. Can't wait to watch that
That was
movie.
good.
Yeah,
It was very good. I was surprised myself. Like I put it on, I'm like, that's a great movie. Like, and I thought I saw that movie way different when it came out too, because I was like 18 or something when it came out. So hadn't been through a lot of life, hadn't been through a lot of relationships. So that movie is one that changed. Like, it got better with time.
yeah. I still haven't been through a lot of life or relationships, but before we go, we also have fine. That's the truth, Andrew. I swear. I also do a podcast with Eric Holmes and Bruce Perky, my betters. We have a recent episode out. Eric Holmes, can you just talk very quickly? What is our recent episode? What do we do it on? A Toxic, not Toxic Avenger.
Elise Guy Blaché.
Yeah.
She is the reason that movies exist today. Full stop.
Full stop. Very little teaser. So, listeners, Will Lindis, Movie Bears Podcast. Thank you. Andrew Martin, Andrew Watches Movie. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce Perky, Eric Holmes. We're going to have that beer very, very soon. Most importantly, folks, take a look at I'm Thinking of Ending Things and tell us, no matter what podcast you listen to, comment and tell us about our interpretations and most importantly, your overall thoughts on this very interesting Charlie Kaufman romantic comedy. All right.
And you can join us all in a Facebook group too called Cinematics and let us know your opinions there on this movie and get the whole discussion going online.
Thank you for that plug, Andrew. That was really cool. It's hosted by Anderson Cowan and a silly little Asian. I don't know what his name is. All right, guys, we will talk to you later.
Did you know he's Thai?